Okay, so Sacrifice Poet, are you ready to be sacrificed? Please welcome Max Inmon to the mic.
How to poetry. Here we are. I'm starting the poetry slam. So I want to portray poetry in an accurate manner, but I have no idea what I'm doing. Lucky you. Therefore, I decided the best place to start would be with figuring out exactly what poetry was. Naturally, I went to dictionary.com. My favorite definition was poetic qualities, however manifested. The next step was to figure out what poetic meant. This time, dictionary.com told me that poetic meant of or pertaining to a poet or poets. Now, the only question that remains is, what is a poet? Well, that question has been asked throughout the years. Modern society has been given the gift of dictionary.com. According to that magnificent website, a poet is a person who composes poetry. So here's the situation. To write poetry, I have to express poetic qualities. But to express poetic qualities, I need to be a poet, and to be a poet, I need to write poetry. That's confusing. Dictionary.com has failed me. Naturally, I should look up quotes about poetry and figure out what they say I should do. Oscar Wilde is credited for saying, all bad poetry springs from genuine feeling. That's okay. Lying about my feelings is the majority of what I do. According to Robert Frost, poetry is what's lost in translation. Apparently Google Translate is more of a poet than I am. Bob Dylan tells us it's not easy to define poetry. Clearly he works for dictionary.com. Now Robert Louis Stevenson said wine is bottled poetry. That is finally something I understood. So after ingesting as much poetry as possible, I wrote a haiku called This is a Haiku. There are 5 on top and 7 in the middle. Syllable is too long. I ran out of syllables.
When I asked if Max would be our sacrifice poet, it did not occur to me to ask if he was a poet. He said yes. That's all I needed to hear. Judges, get your scores ready. On the count of 3, hold them high so I can see them, and then we'll read them off to the scorekeepers. 1, 2,